Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm James Zervios, OAC's Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. And today we have a very special conversation lined up. We're speaking with Summer Kessel, a registered dietitian who is also a GLP-1 user, giving her a unique perspective on both the science and the lived experience of using these obesity medications. We'll dive into how GLP-1s have influenced her relationship with food, her professional insights on weight management, and an important topic that many people struggle with: food noise. What is it? How does it impact daily life? We're about to find out. Let's get started. Hello, Summer.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, thank you very much for being here. Now, Summer, you're both a dietitian and a GLP-1 user, which gives you a unique perspective. Can you start by maybe sharing a bit about your journey with weight and health and what led you to consider a GLP-1 treatment for yourself?
Yeah, I've struggled with my weight my whole life. So, since I can remember being a young girl in dance class, the biggest girl in the class, I've always struggled with my weight. And so much so that I went back to school to be a registered dietitian as a second career later in life because I was still, even into my 20s, after starting work and a family, still so struggling with my nutrition. I had actually lost 100 pounds through diet and exercise, the good old fashioned way. And it was awful and horrible and really hard and really difficult, but I had done it. And then I regained it. And I was so frustrated. I was working as a registered dietitian, really good at my job, I felt like, could help other people lose weight, but I couldn't quite figure it out for myself. And that's when I started learning about the GLP-1 medications and realizing that it wasn't a me problem. Like, it wasn't that I didn't know how to lose weight or I couldn't do it. It was a biology problem, that I was just so hungry all the time. And I had this food noise that no matter what I did to try to manage my nutrition and manage my weight in a super healthy, balanced, not super restrictive way, I was still so very hungry all the time. And food called to me. And I had a really hard time staying consistent with any sort of nutrition plan that I was trying to follow. So when I started my GLP-1 medication, it was like all of a sudden, all this great knowledge I had about decently healthy nutrition finally worked for weight loss because I had hunger and fullness cues that were effective. And the GLP-1 medication truly has just been life-changing, not only for me personally, my health and my weight, but in how I work with other people. So I dove headfirst into working with people who are also on these medications, because I just believe that they're so powerful and useful and amazing.
Yeah, Summer, so many of the points that you just brought up are incredibly valid. And we hear so often from people around losing weight, the weight regain, and especially the food noise, part of it. And this is something that I think has become a little bit more prevalent, maybe a lot more prevalent over the past couple of years, this concept of food noise and how it impacts people. Summer, as a dietitian, you've counseled many people on managing their relationship with food. From your personal experience, how have GLP-1s changed the way you think about and approach food choices?
Yeah, I think that we often, unfairly so, put a lot of responsibility on the individual to make good choices, right? To know what to do and to make good choices throughout their lives to manage their weight. I think that's really unfair because we don't have as much control over our choices as we may want to have. We are subject to the very food rich environment that we live in and our stressors and our daily lives that take precedence sometimes. And making a good choice is not as black and white, straightforward as one might think. There's a lot of confusion around what that even means. Like, what is a good choice? What is good nutrition? And it's very reasonable that a lot of people get very confused, frustrated, and upset about how certain foods are unavailable to them, or they really love certain foods, or they should and shouldn't have them. And it can be a very frustrating and difficult experience. When it comes to these GLP-1 medications, they kind of release a lot of that tension that people have around making a food choice, and it becomes a little clearer that they can eat reasonably healthy, doesn't have to be perfect, kind of like a reasonable meal. And because the appetite signaling is finally working really well, can stop when they're full. So people are able on these medications to avoid overeating. And in doing so, some of these foods that previously maybe we didn't have a great relationship with become so much less powerful.
Now we
So,
and just interject for a sec. So when we're talking about this in the way of, kind of, I'd like to next dive into how does food noise play into that food choice. And so, but
mhm.
continue on, because I think I have a couple questions based on some of the topics you just brought up.
Yeah, I think, I was going to give the example for me personally. I've always had a sweet tooth. I've always been like a cookie person. And if you brought a pack of Oreos into my house or some sort of cookie into my house, I couldn't just stop at one. Right? But it's a very normal, healthy human thing to see a cookie that tastes good and want to eat it. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're a person with a huge appetite who struggles with food choices, when those foods become available, we almost feel powerless to them and have to eat them all. Now, on a GLP-1 medication, that one cookie or one or two cookies, a reasonable serving size, is enough. And they're not a problem food anymore. They're just there. And I could take it or leave it sometimes. Sometimes I really want a cookie. Sometimes I don't really care for it. These foods become less powerful. We're able to make more clear choices around foods when that GLP-1 is in place. And to be fair, people are able to learn to do this, to rebuild this relationship with food without the GLP-1 medications. It was really hard work. Behavior change and relationships with foods and learning to eat more intuitively and be more mindful around our food choices is a skill that we can practice and work on and get better at. But there's some degree of biology that drives that like want for these foods, that when that's quieter, all of this work is just easier to do.
So it almost seems like these are, the food choice and the food noise. There's a relationship there, which you've, beautifully explained here, and I think that's something that we're hearing more and more of these days, especially with the GLP-1 medications, is sort of quieting that food noise. And I guess my next question for you is for people considering a GLP-1. If they're unsure if it's the right treatment option for them, what would you tell someone, given your professional and your personal background with them?
Well, the first step is to talk to your doctor to make sure you're safe and appropriate to take these medications and you meet the criteria. So you have a diagnosis of obesity. It's based on the BMI, unfortunately, whether you agree with the BMI situation or not, but that's the kind of the guidelines that we use. A BMI greater than 30 or a BMI greater than 27 with a weight-related comorbidity, and a doctor who will prescribe them for you. And we'll talk with you honestly about the pros and cons of these medications because they're not for everyone. They do come with some side effects and some risks. But overall, they are FDA approved for weight management, the Zepbound and the Wegovy, and are recognized as safe and effective when used responsibly and under the oversight of a prescribing physician. I think that if folks have access to a registered dietitian that they can work with on those nutrition skills and habits while they take those medications, that is the best potential combination. You had asked, like, how does somebody know if these medications are really right for them? I think if you identify as a person who, no matter what you've done to try and control your weight, it's just not happening. Or you're able to lose it and then you regain it really easily. You're hungry all the time. You feel powerless to food. You make choices sometimes in the moment that you regret when it comes to food. You're trying your best. Maybe you've met with the dietitians, you've done all the programs, you've talked to your doctor, maybe you've taken other medications for weight management before and still struggling and still frustrated. I think that those are the people who would benefit the most for seeking out a doctor to work with to take these medications. They're certainly not for, vanity weight loss, 10 to 15 pounds. They're not for a quick fix. They're definitely intended to be taken more of a long term. So it's worth having that conversation about what to expect, some of the risks, some of the benefits, to see if it's really right for you. It may not be right for everyone, and that's okay. And there are other ways, obviously, to manage weight without these medications. But if they're accessible to you, either covered by your insurance or affordable to you, I think it's worth exploring if you're somebody who's struggled with your weight for a really long time.
Yeah, I think you brought up so many very valid points there. And I want to just sort of, as we close this out, kind of, highlight a few of the ones that I've heard in there. So first, these medications are meant to be utilized under the care of a healthcare professional, right? I
Correct.
know OAC has obesitycareproviders.com where folks can go on and find an obesity medicine specialist in their area. You also talked about the importance of a dietitian. And I know that obviously you have value of that from a professional perspective, but I can't stress that enough, that there is a very real need to have a dietitian a part of this treatment plan as well. So I think that holistic approach that you really talked about is very, very important. And then also recognizing the accessibility issue with a lot of these medications, and recognizing as well that there are treatment options available for people with, dealing with obesity. And so you hit on some unbelievably, key points there. This has been an incredibly valuable discussion, and I want to thank you for taking the time to share both your professional expertise and personal journey with us. And, I would say to anyone watching, if you found this conversation helpful, be sure to share it with others who might benefit from it. And remember, everyone's path to health looks different. Finding the right tools and support can make all the difference. We encourage you to visit our obesitycareproviders.com locator to find a healthcare professional in your area and just start a conversation with them. Summer, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.